Letters pop out from a white background, then turn red. Netflix.
What's up, guys? This is just going to be a quick video talking about why Netflix shows with the audio description track on are pretty much the best quality immersion that will probably ever exist. Now, what I'm talking about here is that with a bunch of Netflix shows, particularly shows that are Netflix originals or just shows that you can only watch on Netflix, there is this alternate audio track you can turn on called the audio description track, which is basically this track that I'm assuming is for blind people, so that blind people can still enjoy the show, where whenever there is something happening on screen besides dialogue, there is this narrator who is just explaining word for word, like exactly what is happening on the screen.
You'll need this.
He hands her a small notebook.
It's for writing your stories and maybe an old school letter or two for your favorite.
She grins.
Now, there are a few reasons why this is really great if you're trying to learn a language. First of all, it's just more immersion, right? Because if you were watching the original version of the show, or the show with the original audio track, then when characters are talking and there's dialogue, you're getting exposure to the language. And when there's some scene where there's no talking going on, like an action scene or whatever, then you're not getting exposure to the language. But with the audio track on, you're getting constant non-stop exposure to the language, whether or not there's dialogue.
階段の踊り場で足を止める。駐車場へ1台の乗用車。運転席にスーツの男。助手席にも人影。目を凝らす久美子。
But even beyond this, because the narration audio is explaining exactly what is happening on the screen in real time, it kind of makes it the most comprehensible audio ever. Because, for example, if, the narration says, person A picked up a blank, and then you just see person A pick up a toothbrush, well, now you know the word for toothbrush.
A guy with a joint opens the kitchen door and leaves. Red cups litter the table, a windowsill, and a corner shelf. A guy passes a bong. A pizza sits in the middle of the table.
But this is not only really good for learning totally new nouns or for actions and things like that. It's also good for calibrating your understanding of nouns nouns and verbs and words that you already know, because you get to see exactly what word a Japanese person would use to describe a physical action. And this is really cool because there's a lot of words that tend to only really come up in things like novels. And so it's hard to really tell exactly what physical action a certain verb, for example, is referring to, even when you look it up in the Japanese dictionary or the monolingual dictionary, because you just can't see it, And so I want to just show you guys a few examples kind of with my own narration explaining why these audio tracks are so powerful. So let's take a look. Okay, so this is a scene from the 4th episode of the new Netflix series called夫のちんぽが入らない. And in this scene, the main character, who is a female elementary school teacher, is getting worked up because due to a special circumstance, she hasn't been able to have sex with her husband. And so as she meets with the parents of all of her students, she's going through this kind of internal dialogue saying, wow, even these parents are having sex. Even these parents are having sex. So in the following scene, the actual content of the conversation between the parents and the main character is not very important. Also, all the main character is repeating back to herself over and over is, wow, even these parents are getting it on, these parents are getting it on. And so what I want you to pay attention to is the actual narration from the audio description track.
どうも進み具合が遅いっていうのとちょっと
この人たちだってちゃんと入れてる。
リビングに教育ママとその夫。
Okay, so what that basically just said was, in a living room, there is a kyoiku mama and her husband. So a kyoiku mama is a mother who is super into making sure that her kid gets the best education possible and is always doing the best in his class and is eventually going to go on to get into really good schools and stuff. For example, in Dragon Ball Z, Bulma was always called a kyoiku mama within the show. And so we can learn from this that whatever Japanese guy sat down to write the script for this audio description track, when he looked at these parents and was deciding how to describe them, he thought that the word kyoiku mama was the best fit. And so we can kind of draw the conclusion that in the collective consciousness of the Japanese people, kyoiku mamas kind of look like this. This is what they tend to look like, and you can make a mental note of that.
で教えてもらった方が給食費なんですけど。
元ヤン風のママ。
Okay, so that was motoyan fu no mama, which means a mother who looks like a motoyan. And motoyan is short for motoyanki, which basically means a woman who used to be a Yankee or a Yankee, which is basically someone who looks like this and is always breaking the rules and getting into trouble. So we can see, again, in the minds of the Japanese people, this is what they think a motoyan kind of looks like. If they were going to describe someone as looking like a motoyan, this is the kind of image that comes up, and we can learn that.
据え置きです。
横に作業員の夫。
Sitting next to her, a sagyoin no otto, which means a sagyoin husband, and a sagyoin is basically someone who does physical labor for a living. So someone who looks like this, that is the typical image of a sagyoin, someone who's not a salaryman but just does physical labor for a living.
弁当屋の夫婦。
So that one was just a husband and wife who are bento makers, and so I guess not too much to be learned on this one.
この人たちだってちゃんとしっかり入れてるんだ。
セレブ夫婦。
Okay, so serebu fufu. So a couple who are serebu, which is basically the Japanese English for celebrity, but it doesn't really mean celebrity. In Japanese, serebu just kind of means that you're living a high-class life and that you're fancy. And so again, we can see this is the image that Japanese people have when they think of the word serebu. And you can remember that and make those associations, match up your understanding of Japanese with the Japanese collective consciousness.
久美子の目は股間に釘付け。
So Kumiko's eyes are nailed to his crotch. So this is a good example for where, for example, maybe you already knew the word kugizuke, but you didn't really have a good image of what that looked like in reality. Well, now you know this is what kugizuke looks like.
これはまずい。
英語の話。英語。どうもありがとうございました。失礼しました。気をつけて。
表で見送るセレブママ。
So in front of the house, the serebu mama, the celebrity mother or whatever, watches Kumiko go away, or miokuru's Kumiko. And so this word miokuru, we don't really have it in English, basically means to just stand and watch as the other person goes away. And that's normally what you do when someone who visited you is on their way. So again, if you didn't really have a clear image of what miokuru looks like, well, this is what it looks like.
怪げな顔。
So kegen na kao, this means to have a kind of skeptical or doubtful look on your face, as if you're kind of skeptical whether something is true or you're kind of judging something. And so if you're ever wondering, well, what does a kegen na kao actually look like? Well, that's what it looks like.
振り向いた久美子に愛想笑いを返す。
So she does an aisowarai towards Kumiko, who turned around. So an aisowarai is basically a fake smile or laugh that you put on in order to be polite, but you don't really mean it. It's just to be polite. And so again, this is what Japanese people think a typical aisowarai looks like, and we can learn from that. So hopefully that gives you guys a pretty good idea of what kind of stuff you want to be looking for when watching shows with the description track on in order to learn as much as possible. I also wanted to say that with the link that I'm going to put in the description, you can see a list of all of Netflix shows that contain a audio description track, but make sure that you set your actual Netflix interface language to the language that you are studying, because if it's set to English, you will only find shows that have a description audio track in English. But you don't need a VPN or anything. All you have to do is change your interface language to your L2 and you should be good. So hopefully that was useful. That's all from me, and see you next time, guys.